The moment my ex looked the judge in the eye and said, "She's unstable. She lies to our daughter. I want full custody," I felt the air leave my lungs. He said it so calmly, as if it were fact carved in stone, as if his words were more believable than my existence. The judge's eyes flickered, and for a terrifying moment, I thought she believed him. My chest tightened. My fingers shook against the wooden armrest of the courtroom chair. I wanted to scream, to fight, to tear through the silence with the truth, but all that came out was a ragged breath. Behind me sat my daughter Mila, 7 years old, her small hands folded around my mother's, her wide brown eyes locked on mine. She could see it, I was drowning, and no one was throwing me a rope. Damon, my ex-husband, wore his navy suit like armor. To anyone else he looked calm, responsible, maybe even admirable. But I knew better. That same mouth speaking lies in steady tones had once screamed at me over the wrong takeout order, had once called me pathetic when I begged him to lower his voice. And yet here in front of the court he looked like the picture of stability. The judge asked me if I had anything to say. I opened my mouth, but my tongue felt like stone. My lawyer glanced at me helpless. I could hear my heart beat fast and hollow echoing inside my ears. I was about to lose the one thing I lived for, my daughter, my Mila. And then, just as the silence threatened to bury me, a voice rang out. Small, clear, and steady. "Your Honor, I brought a video from Daddy's phone. I think you should see it." Everything stopped. Damon's face drained of color. My mother gasped, gripping Mila's shoulder, as if to anchor her, but Mila stood brave and unshaken. She held her pink school tablet in both hands, clutching it like a shield, and walked to the front. She looked so small, her sunflower dress brushing her knees, but she carried herself like she had been waiting her whole life for this moment. The judge frowned, confused. "What is this?" Mila's voice didn't tremble. "From last weekend," she said. "Daddy didn't know I was awake, but I was. He said things. I thought, if you didn't believe Mommy, maybe you'd believe him." I couldn't breathe. My daughter, my 7-year-old, had done what I couldn't. She stood for both of us. She spoke the truth. But before that moment, before this courtroom, there was just us. Me and Mila. Our apartment wasn't much. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, floors that creaked with every step after 10 at night. But to Mila, it was magic. She called it our nest. Pink curtains in her room made it look, she said, like the inside of a cotton candy cloud. She would lie on her bed with her stuffed penguin Pepper and beg me for 2 bedtime stories instead of 1. I always said yes. I worked as a freelance graphic designer. The money wasn't great, but it was enough to keep us afloat. My mom lived just a few blocks away, and she showed up in all the quiet ways that mattered, dropping off lasagna unannounced, scrubbing the bathroom when I was too tired to notice, holding my wrist when I felt like I might fall apart. "You're doing better than you think, Arya," she would tell me. For a while I believed her. Mila was the kind of child who could undo me with her tenderness. Once she found me crying in the kitchen late at night. She didn't say a word. She just draped her blanket over my shoulders, her little body curling into mine. That's who she was. Gentle, observant, braver than I ever gave her credit for. We had a ritual, our truth jar. Anytime she had a question too big to say out loud, she'd write it down and drop it into the jar. Each night we'd pull out one note and talk. Sometimes they were silly. Why do people snore? Sometimes they shattered me. Will Daddy stop loving me if I stay with you? And always I told her the truth. Because if I couldn't give her certainty in life, I could at least give her honesty. Damon didn't want custody because he cared. He wanted control. He criticized everything I did, what I fed her, what time I dropped her off, even what clothes she wore. On paper, it looked like joint custody. In practice, it was his stage, his script, his narrative. Mila would return from weekends with him, withdrawn, silent, sometimes so tense she wet the bed again. I brought it up in court once, but Damon knew how to present himself. A charming sales executive, always with the right smile and the right tone. In public, he was warmth and charisma. In private, he was fire and ice, and Mila was caught in the middle. I documented everything. Texts, emails, every cruel word. But in court, truth doesn't roar. It whispers under the weight of evidence twisted into strategy. Damon's lawyer painted him as the perfect father and me as unstable. I was told not to interrupt, not to show emotion, but inside I was screaming. Mila saw it all. She saw the tears I tried to hide, the nights I whispered, "It's going to be okay," when I wasn't sure it would be. She listened, she carried more than I ever wanted her to. I didn't know she was planning anything, she was just 7. But somehow she understood that silence would cost us everything. So when she stood in that courtroom, her tablet in her hands, and said, "I think you should see it," I knew in my bones that nothing would ever be the same. The bailiff walked forward, taking Mila's tablet with a puzzled look. For a moment, the entire courtroom seemed to hold its breath. Damon's lawyer shifted uneasily in his seat, whispering something urgent, but Damon didn't move. His jaw was tight, his lips a thin line, and for the first time since the hearing began, his polished mask cracked. The judge tapped the play button. At first, there was only the faint hum of background noise, the sound of a chair scraping against the floor. Then his voice, Damon's voice, filled the room. Not the smooth, calm tone he'd used minutes earlier, but raw, harsh, venomous. "You think you're so smart, huh? Go ahead, tell anyone, see what happens. You'll end up living in some foster home, and don't think your precious mother can save you. She's pathetic." Gasps scattered through the gallery. My hands gripped the armrests so tightly my knuckles ached. Then I heard Mila's voice on the recording, quiet, fragile, "I'm sorry." Damon's voice roared back, "Don't talk back. You're lucky I even let you come over. If you say a word to her, I swear." The judge slammed the pause button. Silence spread through the courtroom, thick and heavy. No one moved. The image of the frozen screen glared back, Damon's angry face captured forever. Judge Harmon turned her gaze toward Damon. "Mr. Blake, is that your voice?" His lawyer jumped in, flustered. "Your Honor, this is clearly taken out of context. Disciplinary language misconstrued." "Enough," the judge cut him off, her voice slicing through the air. She looked back at Mila, who stood in her sunflower dress, trembling but unyielding. "Thank you for being brave," the judge said gently. "You may return to your seat." Mila nodded, her little shoulders finally sagging as she walked back to my mother, who scooped her into her lap and held her tightly. My throat burned with the urge to run to her, to wrap her in my arms, and tell her she should never have had to carry this burden. But I stayed in my seat, because this moment belonged to her, not me. The judge turned to me. "Miss Lennox, do you have anything further to add?" I swallowed hard. For the first time all morning I found my voice. "No, Your Honor, I think my daughter said it all." The judge leaned back, eyes closed briefly, as if weighing the weight of what had just been revealed. When she opened them, her gaze was sharp and steady. "In light of this evidence, I am ordering an immediate review of all custody arrangements. Effective immediately, temporary full custody will be granted to Miss Lennox. Mr. Blake will be restricted to supervised visitation only until further notice." The words crashed over me like a wave. Relief, shock, disbelief tangled in my chest. Damon bolted upright. "This is outrageous. She manipulated the child?" "Sit down, Mr. Blake," the judge ordered. The bailiff moved closer and Damon froze. His face twisted with fury he could no longer disguise. He looked like a man cornered, his polished mask stripped away by the voice of a little girl. When the gavel fell, the hearing ended, but I couldn't move. My body shook as if it had been bracing for an earthquake that had finally arrived. Mila tucked her face into my mother's scarf, her small body shuddering. I stood slowly, crossing the room to kneel beside her. "You were so brave," I whispered. My voice cracked, but I didn't care. She didn't look up, just nodded, whispering I didn't want to. But I had to. Tears blurred my vision. I pulled her close, breathing her in, feeling the weight of everything she had carried. "You shouldn't have had to," I said softly. "But you did it. And you changed everything." The bailiff escorted Damon out of the courtroom. His lawyer trailed behind, pale and shaken. When the door slammed shut behind them, the tension in the room seemed to dissolve like a window had been opened after years of suffocating air. For the first time in what felt like forever, I could breathe. As people filed out, some stole glances at me and Mila. One woman mouthed the word brave as she passed. I didn't know her, but her eyes glistened, and it struck me that maybe our story was bigger than this courtroom. Outside, the courthouse steps stretched before us like a stage. The sun was too bright, the air too sharp. Mila gripped my hand with her small fingers sticky with sweat. My mother walked on my other side, her jaw set in fierce protection. Damon was nowhere in sight. Reporters hadn't caught wind of our case, it wasn't public, not yet. But I could feel the ripples beginning. The truth had been spoken out loud, undeniable, caught on a recording that shattered the performance Damon had so carefully constructed. That afternoon, we went to my mother's house. She made soup because she always made soup on days when emotions ran too high. She said it gave her something to stir when everything else felt out of control. Mila sat at the kitchen table drawing with crayons, silent, but her little shoulders looked lighter somehow. Later, she handed me her drawing, two hands holding a heart. Underneath, in uneven letters, she had written, "Truth is brave." The tears I had been holding back all day finally spilled. Not hidden tears, not the quiet sobs I buried in pillows, but the kind that came from somewhere deep where fear and relief collided. Mila didn't say anything. She just leaned against me, her head small and warm against my arm. That night before bed, we pulled out the truth jar again. It had been sitting dusty on the shelf, forgotten in the chaos of court filings and custody battles. Mila pointed to a folded slip on top. I opened it and read, "What happens when the truth hurts people?" I looked at her. "Did you write this?" She nodded, eyes wide and searching. I squeezed her hand. "Sometimes truth hurts, but silence hurts more. What you did today didn't hurt anyone, you protected us." Her gaze lingered on the jar. Then she whispered, "I think we should keep doing this." "We will," I promised. In the quiet after the storm, life didn't snap back into shape. It loosened like a too tight knot, finally giving. My mother's house smelled of thyme and chicken stock, and Mila's crayon drawing lay on the table between us. Two small hands cupping a red heart, the letters wobbly, but certain. Truth is brave. I traced the curve of the heart with my fingertip and felt something slow and heavy lift inside my chest. A weight I'd been carrying so long, I'd learned to balance my days around it. I wanted to memorize this moment. The hush, the unspooling, the sight of my daughter breathing, without flinching, as proof that fear is not the same thing as destiny. That night, when the house finally settled and the spoons stopped clinking, I tucked Mila into bed at my mother's and sat on the carpet beside her. We opened the truth jar. It had dust on the lid, a thin gray ring like a calendar mark for all the nights we forgot ourselves, and I felt a pinch of shame. Mila watched me with those watchful eyes of hers, the ones that catch fallen words before they hit the floor. I read the note at the top. "What happens when the truth hurts people?" And I told her the answer. I'd never dared say out loud that truth can bruise, but silence breaks bones. That telling the truth isn't the same as attacking someone. That courage sometimes looks like a small girl standing on her own 2 feet in a room full of adults who forgot how. She didn't speak for a long time. Then she reached out, slid the note back into the jar, and whispered, "We should keep doing this." I promised we would every night, even if all we could manage was a single sentence and a shared breath. The days that followed felt like walking through a house after a power outage. The lights back on, but your hands still searching the walls for a flashlight. The court issued instructions we read twice, then a third time, as if the words might change if we looked away. Supervised visitation only pending evaluation. A court-appointed counselor to interview Damon. Temporary full custody to me. I copied the dates into my planner in neat, deliberate letters, the way you write a prayer when you're not sure who is listening. I expected Damon to explode in messages, but there was only a brittle silence, the kind that rattles the windows on a windless day. When an email finally came, it was clean and formal and drained of heat, all logistics, no father. I answered with the same distance, not because I didn't have words, but because I no longer needed to use them to prove our reality. The judge had seen it. She had heard it. And so had he. Mila moved differently. Not louder, she had never been loud, but with a steadiness that made rooms feel safer. She talked to Pepper the penguin about the difference between telling and telling on, and she taped her drawing above her desk like a flag planted on a hill we had almost died climbing. At breakfast, she asked if brave people still get scared. I told her yes. We just don't let fear write the ending. Later, she wrote on a scrap of paper, "Can kids protect grown-ups too?" I folded the note into a tiny square and held it to my heart before dropping it into the jar. "You did," I said. Her shoulders tipped forward, a small bow to a truth she hadn't expected to own. I booked therapy again. Not the emergency kind, the stop the bleeding sessions where you sit upright because if you lie down, you'll drown, but the kind where you begin carefully to trust quiet. I told my therapist how rage used to terrify me more than grief, because grief tells the truth about what was lost, and rage tells the truth about what was done. I told her how I had tried to parent with gentleness so hard I forgot that boundaries are a kind of love. She asked me to notice my breath when I say no. I did. It steadied. The homework felt strange at first. Sit with safety for 2 minutes. Name 5 things that don't hurt, but it began knitting something back together that separation had frayed. The evaluation for Damon came faster than I expected. I sat in the waiting room while he met with the counselor in a back office. The door closed, the hum of the HVAC loud enough to swallow thoughts. I imagined the versions of himself he would offer the steady provider, the misunderstood father, the reasonable man pushed to the brink by a hysterical ex. I didn't try to guess which mask would stick. Masks are designed to fool a gaze, but recordings aren't. When he walked past me afterward, he didn't look up. I realized then that whatever tether he'd used to keep us in orbit around his narrative had snapped, and he was learning what it felt like to float without an audience. On a Tuesday, the counselor called with follow-up questions, the kind that tiptoed toward the center of the story. Had Mila withdrawn after weekends? Had she reported threats? Had I noticed changes in sleep appetite, Art? I answered carefully, and then, when she asked about the jar, I told her everything. She was quiet for a long time, and when she spoke, her voice had changed. "That's a powerful practice," she said. "Keep it." My mother kept arriving with soup, even on warm afternoons. She said it gave her something to do with her hands when life was too much for her mouth. Sometimes she scrubbed my sink until it shone, and sometimes she sat at the edge of the couch and watched Mila draw trees with roots so deep the paper looked like it might tear. "Roots," my mother said, nodding like a judge granting a motion. "That's what we're growing." There were still bad nights. Fear has a way of tapping old pipes, reminding you that you once lived with a leak. I would wake to the phantom sound of Damon's voice and lie in the dark, listening for a danger that wasn't there. On those nights, I would sit at the kitchen table with the jar, pull out a question, and answer it on the back in my own cramped script. Sometimes I woke Mila gently and asked if she wanted to add one too. Sometimes I let her sleep because safety also means not needing to be on watch. 4 weeks later, the final hearing date appeared on the calendar like a small black door. We were different by then. Not healed. Healing is a story told in seasons, not days, but sturdier, like a house with new beams hidden in the walls. I pressed my palm to the truth jar before we left for court, the glass cool under my hand, and whispered a thank you to the girl who had stood up when I couldn't, to the voice that had been recorded, to the room that had listened. On the courthouse steps, Mila squeezed my fingers twice, our private code for "I'm here." I squeezed back twice for "I know" once more for me too. Inside, the judge's eyes were the same, steady and clear. Papers shuffled, formal words stitched the air. And then the decision: full physical and legal custody to me, strictly supervised visits for Damon in a neutral center, no overnight stays, no more rooms where threats could be whispered and called love. I didn't exhale until we were outside again, where the light was bright and ordinary and kind. Mila looked up and asked, "Is it over?" I told her the truth. It's safer now. We're not done growing through it, but we're not afraid anymore. That night, we ate pancakes in a diner with red booths, and Mila stirred her chocolate milk with a straw like it was a wand. People moved past our table carrying their own quiet battles, and I felt for the first time in years not alone among strangers. We went home, to the jar, to the pink curtains, to the creaking floors that announced every footstep like applause. I tucked her in and waited for sleep to take her, then stood at the window and watched the streetlights hum. The world had not become simple, but the story had turned, and we had our hands on the pen. The weeks after the ruling felt different, not because the world stopped throwing punches, but because I no longer braced for them the same way. For the first time since the divorce, I walked through our apartment without checking shadows for echoes of Damon's voice. The air felt lighter. Mila's drawings changed too. She used to sketch houses with boarded windows and skies filled with rain. Now she drew trees with deep roots and kids holding hands under bright suns. One night she taped a new picture above her bed, a jar glowing like a lantern. Inside it, she'd scribbled one sentence in crooked block letters: "Truth saves." Therapy became a rhythm, a place where I learned that healing isn't about erasing the past, but giving it less power over your breath. My therapist asked me once, "When you say no now, how does it feel?" I told her it felt like air filling a room that had been locked for too long. I practiced it at the grocery store when a stranger cut in line at home, when Mila asked if she had to finish her broccoli. No wasn't a threat anymore. It was a boundary, and boundaries were love. Mila grew louder in her own ways. At school, she started a truth circle with two of her friends using an old mason jar she decorated with stickers. They wrote questions like, "Why do friends fight?" or "Do teachers get scared too?" and read them out loud during recess. When her teacher told me about it at pickup, her eyes brimmed with tears. "She's teaching us something," she said quietly. I laughed, but there was pride in my chest so strong it hurt. Damon faded into the background like a storm seen from far away. Supervised visits were arranged at a neutral center, a beige building with glass walls and staff who spoke in careful tones. The first time Mila went, she clutched Pepper the penguin to her chest and whispered, "I don't have to go alone, right?" I reminded her that a counselor would be in the room the whole time, that she was safe. She nodded, but her little body trembled when she walked in. When she came out an hour later, her face was pale but her eyes clear. "He was nice," she said, then added, "Too nice." I asked her what she meant. She shrugged, like he was pretending for the cameras. Even at 7, she knew performance when she saw it. The counselor later confirmed what I suspected. Damon smiled, asked, rehearsed questions, avoided anything real. "He's trying to rebuild an image," the counselor told me. "But children don't need an image. They need safety." Hearing that word safety from a professional who wasn't me loosened something deep in my chest. My mother kept showing up with soup. She said it gave her hands something to do while her heart watched us mend. She told Mila stories about when I was little, how I once refused to eat peas for 3 straight months, or how I hid love notes under my pillow for my imaginary friend. Mila laughed so hard she almost fell off her chair. Later, she whispered to me, "You were a kid once too," I smiled. "Still am some days. But the nights were the hardest. Trauma doesn't leave just because the judge says so." There were times I woke at 3 a.m., convinced I heard Damon's footsteps in the hall. I would tiptoe into Mila's room and sit on the floor, watching her chest rise and fall until my breathing matched hers. Sometimes she stirred, rolled over, and whispered, "It's okay, Mommy. I'm here." The roles reversed, and I realized that survival had made her wise in ways I wished it hadn't. One evening, a few weeks later, I found a new note in the truth jar. It said, "Do brave people still get scared?" I sat on the couch with the slip of paper trembling in my hands, waiting for Mila to crawl into my lap like she always did. When she did, I read it aloud. "Yes," I told her. "They just don't let fear be the end of the story." She looked at me thoughtful, then scribbled a new note on the spot. "Can kids protect grown-ups too?" The question shattered me. I pulled her close, pressing my lips to the crown of her hair. "You did," I whispered. "You already did." By the time the final custody hearing approached, I knew the outcome would be different. The counselor's report was detailed and damning: controlling behavior, emotional volatility, a lack of empathy. Combined with the video, it was undeniable. Damon denied everything, of course, but his words no longer mattered. They were hollow against the truth. The day of the final hearing, Mila wore her sunflower dress again, this time with a small hair clip shaped like a star. For luck, she said. My mother wore her church scarf, the silky one that seemed to carry every prayer she'd ever spoken. And I carried the jar with me in my bag, not because I thought I'd need it in front of the judge, but because it had become our compass. When the judge delivered her decision, full legal and physical custody to me, strictly supervised visits for Damon, I didn't sob, didn't collapse, didn't cheer. I just breathed. A long, steady inhale that seemed to stretch back through every sleepless night, every whispered threat, every silent prayer. Mila squeezed my hand under the table and whispered, "We did it." We walked out of that courthouse into a world that felt both the same and completely new. The sky was wide, the steps long, the air cool. Mila held my hand, my mother at my side, and for the first time, I believed we were free. He didn't celebrate right away. Freedom, I learned, doesn't come with fireworks. It comes with quiet, with the absence of dread, with mornings where your stomach doesn't knot before you even open your eyes. After the final hearing, we went to a diner with red booths and sticky syrup bottles, the kind Mila loved, because they served pancakes shaped like animals. She stirred her chocolate milk with a straw and asked me, "Is it over now?" I couldn't lie to her. "It's safer now," I said. "We're not done growing through this, but we're not afraid anymore." She nodded satisfied and bit the ear off a pancake bear. At home, we returned to the rituals that had carried us. The truth jar sat on the dresser between her bed and mine, our quiet lighthouse. Each night we pulled one slip of paper and read it. Some were old from the days when fear pressed harder. "Will Daddy stop loving me if I stay with you?" Others were new. "Do brave people still cry?" I answered every one with the only thing I had left to give: honesty. One evening she wrote, "Can kids protect grown-ups too?" I folded the note in half, tucked it back into the jar, and looked at her. "You already did," I whispered. She leaned against me, her hair smelling of crayons and shampoo, and for the first time in years, my tears didn't taste of defeat. They tasted of release. Mila began drawing again, but the pictures had changed. No more stormy skies or houses without windows. Instead, she sketched forests, children holding hands, suns so large they filled the page. On her bedroom wall, she taped one drawing in particular, a jar glowing like a lantern. Inside, she'd written in crooked letters, "Truth saves." I found myself in therapy not because I was falling apart, but because I finally had space to heal. I told my therapist how I used to mistake silence for strength, how I believed swallowing my fear kept us safe. She reminded me that resilience isn't built in silence. It's built in the telling, in the sharing, in the refusal to carry pain alone. That truth was a slow medicine, but it worked. Supervised visits continued for Damon, but the reports were always the same. He smiled too much, asked practiced questions, avoided anything real. Mila told me once after a visit he was nice, but too nice. Even at 7, she understood performance. She didn't need me to translate anymore. My mother kept showing up with soup. She said it gave her something to stir when life felt too heavy. One night, as we all sat at the table, she put her hand over mine and whispered, "You're doing better than you think." For the first time, I believed her without doubt. The truth jar grew heavy with folded notes, but lighter in meaning. They weren't just questions of fear anymore. Some were hopeful, curious, even funny. "Do penguins get lonely?" Mila asked one night, grinning at Pepper, the stuffed penguin tucked under her arm. Another read, "What does happiness sound like?" I answered by saying it sounded like her laugh in the morning when she was still half asleep, but already dreaming of pancakes. 4 months after the final hearing, I realized something simple but profound. Damon no longer lived in the center of our story. We did. Me, Mila, and the truth we carried together. One afternoon, while cleaning her room, I found a crumpled piece of paper under her pillow. It wasn't in the jar, maybe because she wasn't ready to share it aloud. In shaky letters it read, "I'm glad I told." I sat on her bed holding that note and cried until my chest ached. Not out of sorrow this time, but gratitude. Gratitude for her courage, for her voice, for the reminder that truth, no matter how fragile, can turn the tide of a life. I tell this story because somewhere, a mother is sitting in silence right now, afraid that no one will believe her over the man who knows how to smile in public and sneer in private. I tell it because sometimes the bravest voice in the room is not the loudest or the oldest. It's the small one that refuses to stay quiet. Being a good mother, I've learned, doesn't mean shielding your child from every shard of pain. It means standing with her when the glass breaks, teaching her that she can speak, showing her that brokenness is not the end. Mila saved me as much as I saved her. She didn't just hand the judge a video, she handed us back our lives. And maybe that's the heart of this story: we survived, not because the system suddenly worked in our favor, but because a little girl decided silence was no longer an option. She carried the truth into a room that wasn't built to hear her and forced it to listen. If you're still here, thank you for listening. This wasn't an easy story to tell, but I believe stories like this matter. Because maybe, just maybe, another mother will hear it and realize she isn't crazy, she isn't alone, and the truth she carries has power. If this story moved you, please like the video, share it with someone who needs it, and leave a comment below. I read them all, and they mean more than you know. And if you want to hear more real stories, raw and honest, subscribe to the channel. There are more to come. Stay brave, stay kind, and never forget truth matters.